priests are the general rule in contemporary Japan. However, it is worth pointing out that in the earliest stages of Japanese history, it was empresses rather than emperors who ruled. These empresses reigned partly by virtue of their ability to communicate directly with the kami, as in a divine oracle. When emperors came to rule in early historical times, the religious role of the empress was lost. We've already seen that before Shinto worship, the worshipper purifies hands and mouth with water and recites a purification prayer. All of this draws on the mythology of Izanagi's bath. Then, high-ranking priests recite a norito, or sacred prayer. All who are present prostrate themselves as the ritual prayer invokes, or calls down, the kami. There is more music and other offerings. The most important offerings are branches of the sacred tree known as sakaki. As in the rituals of many other religious traditions, Shinto assumes that the kami partake of the spiritual offerings. Communication with the kami ends when the ritual prayer announces the ascent of the kami. Many people travel quite far to visit a large or famous shrine for a festival or for a particular blessing, or just to buy an amulet. These people generally are worshippers, not parishioners. Yet in the traditional village setting, it still is taken for granted that people within the area are parishioners of the local shrine. Most traditional Japanese homes, and some modern homes, feature a small Shinto shrine. The Kamidana is a miniature version of a Shinto shrine that's usually installed on a high shelf in the house's main room. Family members may make offerings at the Kamidana, and from time to time, especially at New Year's, they may bring a new paper talisman from a nearby Shinto shrine and place it on the Kamidana. In ancient times, the people of one clan worshipped the same kami. But in medieval times, the people who lived near a local shrine automatically were considered to be the parishioners of that shrine. In other words, affiliation with a local Shinto shrine depended on one's place of residence. Everyone within that area was considered to be blessed or protected by this tutelary kami.
There's always this underlying orientation to the world that has what we'd say today would be a Shinto perspective to it. There are deities of the land, of the natural world, of ancestral spirits that have to be controlled and maintained. Now, layered upon that are traditions of Buddhism, Confucianism, even Taoism, even later on Christianity, that are not in opposition to, they are in harmony with, and they are syncretic with this earlier orientation. However, at the end of the feudal period, when the Japanese state modernized, there was a split between the old regime, the reformers that wanted to revitalize the Japanese state, bring back the emperor, and basically to be able to defend the nation of Japan from imperial powers such as England, Spain, Portugal, France that were in the area. They felt like they had to do what these powers did. They had to find a spiritual engine to drive this vehicle of modernization, and Shinto was considered to be the most viable candidate for this.
Yet in modern times, especially with Japan's greater religious freedom after World War II, the situation within Shinto has changed considerably. With increased social mobility and the relative anonymity of large cities, many Japanese people have no sense of being a parishioner of a certain shrine. In fact, many Japanese don't even know which shrine would house the tutelary kami of their area.
One of the ways that Shinto helped in the modernization process was to create a notion of community. that we are all one people as Japanese, because basically until 1868 Japan was a fragmented area where there were particular clans that ruled particular areas. But from the 1860s onward there was this notion and a legal entity of the Japanese nation, of the Japanese state. So Japanese had to be created. The emperor was instrumental. Kami and the alignment of Kami, the involvement of Kami with each community and the lives of common people was also very, very important in this whole process of creating the modern Japanese state. Part of this is still with us today in Japan because it does still provide an orientation to the universe, to social relationships, to the relationship that people have with the natural world.
The feudal country of Japan became a modern nation-state in 1868. To understand the significance of 1868, we must go back to the preceding era, when Japan was a collection of feudal territories, each territory ruled by a feudal lord. These territories together were controlled by a military dictator called a shogun. The time of the Tokugawa shoguns lasted from about 1600 to 1867. During most of this time, Japan isolated itself from the rest of the world, and much of the nation's intellectual, ethical, and political thought was dominated by Confucianism. Yet its religious life was Buddhist because of events harking back to the mid-16th century. Christianity had entered Japan in 1549 at the hands of Saint Francis Xavier. It had flourished for about a century before missionaries were persecuted and Christianity was banned. To maintain the ban on Christianity and to control the people, the Japanese government officially supported Buddhism, which, in the mid-17th century, became practically the established religion of the land. Every Japanese family was required to belong to a local Buddhist temple, and all births, marriages, deaths, and changes of address were registered there. Beginning in the late 1700s and early 1800s, a number of problems began to plague Japan's feudal government. The economic imbalance between rich and poor led to peasant revolts and urban uprisings. European countries and the United States were increasingly pressing Japan to open its borders to trade. These and other internal and external pressures caused a growing sentiment within Japan to remove the shogun and to restore the emperor to more direct rule. The late 1800s in Japan were full of attempts to implement a parliamentary government that would be headed by the religiously symbolic figure of the emperor and legitimized by the religion of Shinto. Western countries criticized Japan's prohibition of Christianity and demanded that the ban be lifted. In 1873, the Japanese government relented, allowing Christianity to be practiced and Christian missionaries to be active in Japan. In essence, the Shinto way of life now became a civic and natural duty of the Japanese citizen. School books now taught that Japan was created by the kami and that the emperor is descended from the sun goddess. These beliefs came to be seen as national history and national culture rather than religion. Students were required to bow and venerate the emperor's photograph. At the same time, formal religion was banned in the schools, so Buddhism and Christianity could not be taught. In the drive to unify the people and strengthen the nation, Japan's government linked ancient mythology and official Shinto to absolute loyalty to the emperor, and also to unconditional support for colonialism and militarism. For the first and only time, a large number of Shinto shrines were built outside Japan.
So it was very much in the interests of political leaders to have rituals that were amenable to controlling not only the natural world, but also the ancestral spirits of their household, of other clans, of the people in general, and of people at the lower levels of society, or the non-elite levels.
In the 20th century, especially during and after the 1930s, Japan's schools became much more strict. The curriculum taught absolute loyalty to the emperor and to any policies undertaken in his name. In short, Shinto became very closely caught up in the war effort of World War II. Yet Japan's Buddhists and Christians also strongly supported Japan's war effort and her militarism.
1931, Japanese troops leave for the conquest of Manchuria. Japan, the first of this war's aggressor nations, starting out a full 14 years ago on a career of international conquest and pillage. Shanghai in 1937, full-scale warfare against China. The world was still unready to deal properly with such wanton aggression. Japan's diplomats addressing the League of Nations attempted to justify their crimes against peace and decency, and then walked out. The long series of brutal attacks upon an unprepared neighbor continued. Japan seized a whole new empire. Pearl Harbor, December the 7th, 1941. Japan's fanatical suicide corps in desperation air attacks inflicted heavy damage on American naval forces off Okinawa. This was kamikaze. It was sensational, but it could never stop the Allied advance.
World War II ended in 1945 with a devastating defeat for Japan. Japan's colonial thinking now collapsed. All Japanese religions had supported it, but Shinto was most closely identified with the war effort. When Japan unconditionally surrendered in 1945, Western allies imposed a number of conditions for religion. For the first time in Japanese history, there would be complete religious freedom, not only as an ideal, but also as an actual practice. World War II was settled in 1945 on terms that ushered in a radically new democratic way of life for the Japanese. The Japanese scholar Shigeyoshi Murakami notes that the nation-state of Japan produced state Shinto, and a democratized Japan produced freedom of belief. In short, the Japanese state was now officially separated from religion. The emperor was required to announce that he was not a kami, although the form of his announcement later came to be seen as highly ambiguous. Shinto lost its protected status as a non-religious system of commitments. It also lost state subsidies, and its many priests were no longer government employees. Japan has a rich variety of very old religions. Indigenous Shinto, Indian Buddhism, Chinese Taoism and Confucianism, European latecomer Christianity. Yet Japan has seen the creation of hundreds of new religions in the 19th and 20th centuries. Many Japanese were experiencing a rapidly changing social setting, and they were dissatisfied with the solutions offered by the existing religious institutions. Yet they still were strongly attracted both to traditional themes like the cultivation of virtue and to long-standing customs such as ancestral rites. Many Japanese were drawn to religious leaders who developed their own teachings and practices, and who helped to resolve questions about personal destiny and social order. The Japanese people still believed in the power of both the Buddhist divinities and the Shinto